Poštovani gledatelji, u večerašnjoj emisiji GlazbeEgo vodimo vas u čaroban svijet američke glazbe. 16. ožujka ove godine održan je koncert u regionalnom ciklusu Zagrebačke filharmonije Točka Pika, a gostovali su cijenjeni američki dirigent Jonathan Schiffman i njemački pijanist Andreas Boyd. Publika je imala priliku čuti i osjetiti da s razlogom Andreasa Boyda i punim opravdanjem nazivaju gospodinom 100.000 volta. Energiju i strast kojima pristupa sviranju klavira publika je nagradila velikim pljeskom. Bila je to večer u kojoj je Zagrebačka filharmonija zablistala izvedbom veličanstvenih skladbi uz očaravajuće tonove klavira koji su naelektrizirali dvoranu pozitivnom energijom i oduševljenjem. Stoga je i koncert s potpunim opravdanjem nosio naslov na 100.000 volta. TV Plus i emisija GlazbeEgo, dragi gledatelji, donose vam ekskluzivan intervju uoči koncerta s maestrom Jonathanom Schiffmanom i pijanistom Andreasom Boydom. I would like to start with a question about the concert tomorrow. So, Maestro, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a very special concert because it's all American music, and there are three pieces, and each piece is very different. So this concert will present three very distinct styles of American music. It begins with a piece by a composer named Philip Glass, who's perhaps one of the most often performed living American composers. He's probably familiar to a lot of people through film because he's written a lot of very successful film scores and operas and really all genres. So we're going to perform a piece of his that he wrote in the 1980s called Company, and it was originally for string quartet, and he made a version for string orchestra, which is the one that we're going to present. It has all the typical trademarks of the Philip Glass style, and if you know his music, perhaps the most recognizable attribute is the fact that things get repeated a lot. He's known, although he doesn't like this term, he's considered one of the leading American minimalist composers. The idea that you reduce all of the elements at your disposal and you work with simple melodies, simple structures, and you repeat them to the point that any little change in these repetitions becomes a very important event. And he's really mastered this style. I think this work is absolutely beautiful. It's quite mesmerizing, hypnotizing. And it's always fun to do his music. The second piece on our program features my colleague Andreas Boida, and it's a piece by an American composer named Paul Schoenfield. It's a piano concerto, which is called Four Parables, in 4 movements. Each of these movements is based on stories from his life. And the best way I can think of to describe this concerto is like Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, but with a lot of illegal drugs thrown in, heroin, crack, cocaine, because it's an absolutely crazy and fun concerto. Very demanding, very difficult, virtuosic, but great fun, not only to play, but especially to listen to. We did this a couple months ago in Ljubljana, and the crowd went wild. It's a fun piece. So that'll be, I hope, a very pleasing experience for the audience here in Zagreb. And then we finish our concert with the 3rd symphony of the American composer Aaron Copland. Aaron Copland, for us Americans, is considered sort of the dean of American music, one of our great composers. He was a 20th century composer, and he was a Jew who grew up in Brooklyn. And what's amazing is he really, thanks to his music, he created what's called the American sound in classical music, something which helps describe the vast landscapes of our beautiful country. And he's written music which depicts cowboys, music which depicts religious congregations, the American West, the American frontier. All this is very funny when you know that it was actually a Jew from Brooklyn, and he was really using his imagination, but he helped to establish this American-type sound, which is now recognizable throughout. His 3rd symphony is considered probably by most people to be his crowning symphonic achievement. He wrote 3 symphonies, and this is far and away his most performed work. It's often considered the great American symphony. It has everything you'd like in a symphony: beautiful soaring themes, big climaxes, passages of great delicacy. In the last movement, it contains a theme which is one of the most famous themes probably in American classical music, which has been used in countless ads on TV. It's something which every American, and I think a lot of people here are going to instantly recognize. It comes from a piece which Aaron Copland wrote called Fanfare for the Common Man, a couple years before this symphony. This is during World War II. And this fanfare, a brass fanfare for brass and percussion actually, became so popular that Aaron Copland had the idea to base a whole symphony on this. And we hear hints of this fanfare theme, which I'm not going to give away now. You'll hear it in the concert. We hear hints in the first 3 movements, and it's finally in the 4th movement that he unleashes the brass to give us this fanfare. And eventually he turns it over and turns it into a fugue, transforms it, gives us variations. But this is the genesis of the 3rd symphony, this famous Fanfare for the Common Man. And it's, I have to admit, wherever I do this piece in Zagreb, in any country, it makes me feel like I'm back in America, because it really has this American sound, and it's irresistible. It's great music, all three works. So I'm excited, and it's always great to be making music with such a talented soloist like Andreas here.
Of course, I cannot wait the concert. But can you tell us advice for our audience, for the listeners from Zagreb? How should they listen to the concert tomorrow?
Well, special advice. I think you should just come with an open mind and get ready for 3 pieces, which each one sounds very different. The first is a rather hypnotizing piece, so get ready to be hypnotized by these fun repetitions. The second is pure jazz, things going crazy, lots of fun. And then the third is just this triumphant, very positive, optimistic symphony. The thing I forgot to mention, it was written, the Third Symphony, right after World War II. And this was a time in an American society where we had a lot of confidence, people were very optimistic, and these sentiments really show through in the symphony. So just come with your heart and your ears, and I think let us take care of the rest. It should be very enjoyable.
Wow, that's a very good invitation for our audience. For you, Mr. 100,000 volts, how do you feel here in Zagreb?
Oh, it's wonderful to be here, and it's my first time in Zagreb, and yes, I hope I will bring that energy with the piano concerto.
We can't
to
wait.
Zagreb. And I think it even helps to know a little more about the story behind each movement of the piano concerto, because it relates to events or to a view Schoenfield had about society, for instance, in the first movement, where he has in mind that the whole human society is like a zoo, and they discuss all these meaningless things and get very heated up about it.
So what is your approach, how to play this concert?
Well, I think the approach is to bring out these ideas and turn them into music. And as Jonathan already mentioned, it's so full of musical ideas that, for instance, the first movement, that the presto has all this insanity, and it's also in the second movement you have a sad blues, which depicts a man who suffers from senility, and at some point he all of a sudden remembers his glorious past and his youthful vigor, and that ends in a big blues, which is a marvelous climax to that movement, and then sinks back, to that poor man who is riddled with possibly Alzheimer. Or the third movement, which is about a friend of Schoenfield, who unfortunately died because he belonged to a religious sect and refused medical treatment. And again, when you listen carefully, you can hear these religious rites and people howling, and it all comes to a very scary climax. I find that movement actually quite scary. And in the end, this friend dies, and it goes into another world. And the last movement is just jazz heaven, you could say, but he relates to dogs, because friends of his lost their family pet, and they had to explain that to the boys and didn't know how to do it. So Schoenfield came up with a story. You have a heaven for dogs. Wow. And they can lift their legs at every corner. There's a hydrant, and so this was a consolation for the children.
Wow. So as a pianist, as an artist, you need to be very good with the character to change very fast your movie.
Yes, it's a very challenging piece. I love jazz. I grew up with jazz, so that helps, although I'm a completely classical pianist. But it is quite a unique piece. Also, with the orchestra, I'm very grateful to work with Jonathan, because we are sort of a team which is very important. There is so much going on.
It's not like your typical concerto Mozart, where you have the piano and then the orchestra accompanying. Everything is very integrated.
Indeed.
And actually, we did something unusual. Normally, when you put together a concert, a concerto, the orchestra might rehearse without the soloist for 1 or 2 days,
Yes.
and then you bring in the soloist in the end. This is such a complicated and fun, crazy piece that we began rehearsing everyone together because it's important that the orchestra hears Andreas so we can play off of each other.
Yes,
So this is unusual, but
I-
I think I'm glad we did it.
Yes. And interestingly, talking about classical concertos, if you listen carefully in the last movement, you will hear some quotes. You never quite get the tune because it's not, it sounds like a Mozart piano concerto or a Chopin concerto, but he always makes sure that it is actually still quite unique. But yeah, it is also technically such a challenge because you have to use, well, I guess different techniques to even a Brahms concerto.
So I heard from some musicians from Zagreb Philharmonic Orchestra, they like you both so much. They are very happy that you are here. We also. What was your approach, you as a soloist and you as a conductor, to Zagreb Philharmonic Orchestra? Because it's an American music, maybe something new.
I try to go in with a complete open mind because every orchestra I work with brings something new to the table. And I think as a musician and an artist, you need to be very open to what people bring you because it's not just about a conductor conducting any orchestra, it's really a collaboration. I'm not making any sound, it's the musicians. So often they come in with their sound, which is wonderful, their ideas, which are wonderful. I might have some of my ideas, but we try to find a balance. And so with each orchestra, you find a different sort of balance and a different sound. And what's quite fun is that this music is all, I think I am 100% sure, these are 3 pieces that they're playing for the very first time. They're difficult pieces. So it's fun for them. When you come in and you do a Beethoven symphony that they've done 1,000 times, sometimes it's hard to give your ideas because they're so used to doing it a certain way. Here, it's tabula rasa, a blank slate, so we're really creating something together from scratch.
Yeah, they are very happy for a new music.
It's exciting.
Yes, and for young conductors who will come on the concert, who want to conduct maybe in the
Yeah.
future some of the pieces, do you have some advice?
For young conductors, yeah, really ask yourself every time you get up in front of an orchestra, why are you there? What is your purpose? What are your ideas about the music? And what are you willing to do to communicate them? I think young conductors, it's a hard job because you have 100 musicians all looking at you, and you're the leader up there, and you have to always be thinking about the music and forget about everything else, and be as artistic as possible, inspire, be convincing with your musical ideas, and really encourage the musicians to bring their best. So my advice for the young conductors is, I am a young conductor, so I don't know how much advice I should be giving, actually.
Well,
But it's a fun job, and really our jobs here as conductors, because we're not making sound, we're sort of the servants to the composers. And it's our job, it's our duty as conductors to promote music that we believe in. It might not be the most famous pieces. It might be a piece like Schoenfield, where probably most people don't know this composer, but it's a great piece. Andreas and I both believe in it, and that's our duty to bring this music, because classical music is a living art form, contrary to what some people think. It's still living and breathing. It has a heartbeat. They're wonderful living composers, and it's the duty of a conductor to keep this art form alive.
yes. For you as a pianist, Andreas, what do you think if one young pianist one day want to play this concerto, how should they approach to that piece?
It would be helpful to start with to have a bit of a jazz background. It's enough to appreciate jazz, and then of course you have to be aware of the technical challenges. And I think with this piece you also have to be experienced working with an orchestra, because it's, as I say, sometimes you can, as a soloist, you can just do your thing.
Yes.
And sort of the conductor follows you, hopefully. But it wouldn't work with this concerto. You really have to, it's a give and take with the orchestra and with the conductor. And I think this is a very important aspect. But what I love about the Zagreb Philharmonic, of course, they have their own sound, they have their own advantages, I would call it. And we should make the most out of that as well.
How to change a character so fast? For example, first movement is presto. It's not usual to be, yes?
Yeah, it's that's difficult because you sit there, and I don't want to say too much, but it's not the easiest opening, so to speak, because you have to, you know, for instance, Rachmaninoff, you can tell that he was a pianist because with each piano concerto, possibly apart from the first, but second, third, the Rhapsody, what he does is he starts off at a nice pace and you get into it, and then he builds up, and it becomes, the piano part at some point becomes more difficult. So he actually thinks, as a pianist, you know, you get launched into the performance, and then at some point you're ready to face all the challenges. Here it's different. It's just a huge challenge right from the first note. And switching to different modes is actually technique, as well as, of course, a musical concept. And I remember my first teacher in Dresden always said, you know, listen to Emil Gilels, because he can switch just from a tremendous fortissimo to the most beautiful pianissimo in no time. And this is something which is, of course, it has to be in your timing, it has to be supported by a technique, and you have to feel very strongly about the musical idea which is behind it.
So what do you think as a soloist about conductors?
I love them. I mean, I know a lot of I know a lot of pianists perform Mozart and Beethoven piano concertos without conductors. I mean, it can be a tempting thing, but I also feel that actually it's a very good reason to have a conductor there, because to start with, you always share musical ideas. Of course, I have a concept and I'm very clear about this, but I always like to be inspired as well. So a conductor can be very helpful. And secondly, you know, you want to focus on your solo part, and despite the fact that, of course, I follow very much what is going on in the orchestra, it's very important. It's wonderful to rely on conductors like Jonathan to, you know, to feel free to do whatever you like.
Did you sometimes had the surprises on the concert?
Oh yes, yes, and of course they're both surprises. They're very positive surprises, and this is another amazing thing. The dynamics are different in performance. All of a sudden, you know, everything feels slightly different, which can be dangerous, but it can also be uplifting and very inspiring.
So it's very, very hard job. And Jonathan, what do you think about solists?
Soloists, you know, without soloists, what are conductors? Soloists need conductors, conductors need soloists. It's fun to work with them because it's like Andreas says, it's a collaboration. I'd say most concerts I conduct have a soloist at some point on the program, and it's fun because it's not just you up there imposing your ideas. You're really sharing an experience with someone, and most of the time it's fun working with soloists, and certainly with Andreas.
At 5 years old, you begin to play cello, so you maybe have understanding for the soloists when you're conducting.
Well, I think most conductors start out playing an instrument. For me, it was the cello, and yeah, of course, it gives me a sense because, you know, when I was young, I was a soloist with an orchestra. And I know what it's like. It's not easy. It takes great skill, courage, calm, nerves. It takes a lot of things, which Andreas certainly has. but it definitely gives me respect.
So can you maybe describe to our audience, to people in Croatia, you started in New York City, how was the environment for you to start to be a musician there?
I was lucky. I had two parents. They were not professional musicians, but they loved music. They always went to the ballet. And when I was 5 years old, they took me to a school, for a music school, and the teachers presented all the instruments, and I chose the cello because it was the biggest. And I was encouraged to pursue it all up until university. And finally, when I got to university, I began playing in many different orchestras. I was composing, and it was in university that I began to try conducting for the first time. I liked it, and my family was supportive, so I studied conducting at the conservatory. So I think I was lucky. The main thing is that I had a family that was very appreciative of classical music, and they supported my desire to pursue it.
How are the children in usual school that you go, in elementary, in high school? How was the environment? Was there a support for you as a musician? Or how children looked at you as colleagues?
For me, it was mixed. I was always a bit shy about the fact that I loved classical music. It wasn't cool, you know. In high school, people wanted to listen to rock and roll, which I love, but I also loved, my Mozart and Beethoven. And I felt a bit embarrassed about this. And it wasn't until I went to university that I really met a lot of friends who shared my passion. So at the beginning, classical music was like a private world for me. And if anything, this was, looking back, it was a good thing, because it was sort of my own secret world where I could escape. And it took me a while to realize I'm not the only one. There are many people like me out there.
So I can maybe compare that in Europe is also the same thing, also for the children,
Yeah, I mean, most children, I don't know about most, but there are a lot of children out there who are just not exposed to classical music. And classical music, any sort of music is like a language. You need to listen to it a lot before you can really understand it. The first time a person might hear some difficult work by Schoenberg or Stravinsky, they might not like it. It's after repeated listenings. It's sort of, I come here for the first time, I'm listening to everyone speak Croatian. I don't understand a thing. Yes. It's a pretty language, but I'm only picking out a couple words. If I was to stay here 6 months a year, I would be able to get so much more out of it.
Yes. And Andreas, for you, how did you start to play piano?
Well, I come from a pretty musical family, and I was brought up in East Germany. I started playing the piano when I was 4, and for me it was quite a natural thing. And my early childhood was fairly similar to Jonathan's in terms of, I was one of the few who was quite sort of serious about classical music. But by the age of 11, I moved to Dresden, and I was at the Spezialschule für Musik. And from that age, it was wonderful. I mean, I was in a completely different environment, and all my friends were musicians, and that really changed my life. But I truly believe that classic music, is actually on the rise, incidentally, and I have played a lot in schools, and I have a whole project planned for this autumn in London, and I noticed that I never felt that there was no interest. It's sometimes we as musicians have to be very active about it. I mean, if you think about pop music, they spent up to 1.5 million pounds, British pound, which is about $2 million, to promote just 2.5 minutes of music.
It's
crazy. If you think about this, and we can't expect to spend sort of £50 and get the same results. So we really have to be very proactive about it. And I think someone like Bernstein, did a lot in the 1980s, in particular, to promote classical music in the States, and I think it had great effect, and that should continue like this.
Yes. And Jonathan, what is music for you?
Music is life and emotions. It's as basic and essential as this glass of water. Without music, I can't imagine life.
And Andreas, for you, what is the music?
I would share that view pretty much.
Can you tell to our audience what is piano for you?
The piano seems to be my instrument. I have some rudimentary knowledge about all the other instruments, but this one seems to work for me. You know, my hands seem to get the sounds out of the piano I like. And what I find fascinating is it is an instrument which can very much stand on its own, and there are very few other instruments. Most of them rely on accompaniment or a duo partner. So that also means there's a lot of piano solo repertoire, which is a huge challenge. But what I like about the piano is you can go far beyond a keyboard instrument. So I'm trying to be an orchestra, you know, having all the, you know, orchestrating a sonata by Brahms, or you know, you want to be you want to sound like an organ, or like it should sound like an opera scene, you know, some of even Mozart sonatas or piano concertos. And you get all these different sounds out of the piano. This is what I find particularly fascinating.
Jonathan, when you came to France to conduct, for example, you were assistant of Kurt Masur, yes? What was the feeling to be his assistant?
It was a great learning experience. I was learning from one of the great conductors of the 20th century, and he was a very open person, willing to share his time with me, to explain things to me, which is not always the case with famous conductors. So I was lucky to have that experience with him.
What's that mean for a young conductor to be assistant so famous and great artist as he is?
Well, I think it's very important for a young conductor to assist to watch other great conductors, not only in concert but in rehearsal. And one of the best ways of doing this, especially to build and begin your career, is to work as an assistant conductor, which often means you have to attend all of the rehearsals, be ready to jump in at a moment's notice in case something happens to the main conductor, yes. And that always happens. So it's a great learning experience. This is a job which you have to learn just as a pianist. We all have teachers. It's something that is imparted from someone else or from many different influences. And as a conductor, you really need to learn from watching other conductors.
Then you go to Avignon and then you conduct there with the orchestra. Yes. What is very interesting for our audience in Croatia, that you doubled people that came on the concert of classical music. What was your secret of success? My secret,
within 3 years, we basically doubled the size of our audience. And I think the way I achieved this with the orchestra was being very smart and careful about programming the pieces on our concert. People warned me when I first arrived there, people don't like new music, we want our Mozart, we want our Beethoven. And I thought, that's interesting. But there, you know, I love doing Mozart and Beethoven, and we did many pieces by these great masters. But I thought, you know, I'm an American, I'm young, I should bring something which is special to me. I think the public would be interested to know about that. Composers which might not be so famous but have special meaning for me. So that's what I did. Almost on every concert there was some famous work which is sure to help bring people in, but there was also a work which most people might not have heard before by a composer that I believe in. And often I would talk to the public in French during the concert, just say a couple words, which they always seem to like, to explain a piece, crack a joke, something to make more of an intimate connection between what happens on stage and what happens in the hall. And little by little, I think the audience and the musicians began to trust my judgment and say, you know, he brings in a lot of music we don't know, but we really like this music, and we see that he believes in it, and there's passion with the orchestra. And so, you know, the main thing is you have to put on good concerts, interesting concerts, relevant concerts. I think the most dangerous thing is to just keep on always doing more of the same, because the public will eventually get tired of this, the musicians will get tired of this. It's important to challenge your audience. If you treat them like little kids, the audience will not grow. You have to challenge an audience and make it a learning experience for them. I think that's what people want.
Is that kind of advice for Croatian people, for Croatian artists, when they have a concert, they maybe can talk a little bit with the public?
I think it should work everywhere, sure. Each country has their own traditions, but the things that I was doing, I should be able to apply everywhere, sure. There's no reason why, before a piece, the conductor cannot turn around and say a couple words to the audience. It should be helpful. It might be in a new work to explain something so that when the people hear it for the first time, they might make a special connection. Oh yes, I understand what the music is trying to do.
Yeah, Andreas, what do you think about that?
Oh, I very much believe in it, and I'm trying to do it myself, even with recitals. There could be pre-concert talks. I quite often go to schools, and I will also offer pre-concert talks for the audience, which would come in the evening. I think this makes all the difference, because quite often music tells a story, and if they get the story more familiar with the content of the music, they will enjoy music a lot more.
Why does teenagers think that classical music is not cool?
I don't know if all teenagers, but definitely some.
Yeah, why? Why so?
Well, I think pop music, to start with pop music, it's not just the music itself. It's like, I think the style is used to identify with a certain group. So I guess, composers, dead composers' music, as Nigel Kennedy once said, it's not exactly, something you want to identify with. But it's a bit like Shakespeare. I don't think most teenagers think that Shakespeare is cool, and yet he actually survives as one of the greatest writers and authors of well, I guess the most famous dramas. Interestingly, even in Hollywood, he is the best-selling author up to the present day.
Yeah, it's interesting, yeah. Jonathan, what do you think?
It's complicated. I think one of the big problems is a lot of people think of classical music as being old-fashioned, as Andreas said, written by dead composers. Today's hip-hop music is contemporary, it's vital. It's written by people younger than both of us for an audience of that age. And the effects of pop music are often more immediate. One of the challenges, and I think actually the greatest things about classical music, is that it's not always easy to appreciate. It's like reading sometimes a great novel. Sometimes it's very complicated, and you need to be patient. So classical music demands, I'd say, more attention and patience than other forms of music, but the rewards can be fantastic if you're willing to go on this journey. So it's not always the easiest thing for people. And like I said before, it's like a language. You need exposure, you need to hear it a lot in order for the appreciation to begin, I think.
Jonathan, what was the most crazy place that you had a concert?
Craziest place? Well, I've had some outdoor concerts. One of the very first concerts I did when I was still a student with a professional orchestra was in Texas, and this was in the summer. And if you've never been to Texas in the summer, it's hot. Very, very hot. We're talking, 40 degrees hot and humid, and trying to conduct wearing, a bow tie, tails, just sweat pouring down onto the pages. This was quite an experience.
How did you manage from the beginning to the end of the concert?
I had a glass of water, and I think the musicians had one. So, anytime it just got too hot to play, we would have some water and then start again. But that was quite an experience, I remember.
And what do you think, which was the best hall that you conduct in?
Maybe Carnegie Hall in New York. That's a great hall. I'd say Carnegie Hall.
Why?
My hometown. It's a big hall, it's beautiful, and you can hear a pin drop. The acoustics are marvelous. It makes the sound beautiful, warm, with clarity. And that's very rare in a hall, to have all three things.
What does that mean for a conductor?
Well, it's great for a conductor because when you're conducting an orchestra and you have 100 musicians in front of you, you want to be able to hear all of them. And if you're in a bad hall, sometimes it's very hard to do that. It's often very hard to do that. So you need all the help you can get, and a good hall is one of the ways to achieve that.
And Andreas, for you, what was the most crazy place that you had a concert?
Well, it's very hard to tell which one. I mean, I had tours where spotlights exploded, and I had open-air concerts in front of the Opera House in Dresden, where a hurricane was on the way, and up to the last minute, we didn't know whether it would hit Dresden or not, and then at the very last minute, it took a turn. Really? So the concert went ahead, but the concert promoter was very close to a nervous breakdown. It was terrible, and we had a huge stage, and the owner of the stage said, you know, if it comes, we have to dismantle it before it hits the town, because otherwise it would collapse and cost us millions. So there was a lot of tension in the air.
What did that mean for you as an artist?
That is really difficult because you prepare for a concert and you come close to the performance, and usually, you know, adrenaline builds up and you get really focused and fixed. And I didn't know whether I should now kind of pack up and go home, or would I perform? And it was really quite stressful.
Yes,
actually.
and how the concert was?
It was fine, actually. It's in the end, it all went extremely well. So, but that was quite an evening.
Wow! And what do you think? What is the best concert hall for you?
It's difficult because there are various concert halls. I love the Concertgebouw Amsterdam. It's a bit scary because you stand at the very top of the stage, which is quite high up, and you're positioned there, and then at some point there are two people left and right, and they say, ready? And then they just open the door, and all of a sudden this abyss opens in front of you, and you have to walk many steps to the very bottom of the stage, whilst you feel really watched from all sides. There's not even a railing to hang on to. So it's quite nerve-wracking, but it is a magnificent hall in terms of, you know, traditional old concert hall. And modern concert halls, I love the Cologne Philharmonic Hall, and I have a soft spot for the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester.
Of course. And Jonathan, what is your feeling 5 minutes before the concert?
I'm trying to stay relaxed and focused, trying not to fill my head with too many thoughts, just trying to prepare.
And after the concert?
After the concert, celebrate.
Did you had some moments on the stage when you conduct and some parts maybe musician didn't play well, the orchestra fell apart, so?
It happens to everyone. You know, live music is always riskier. When you listen to a CD recording, things sound perfect. That's because, you know, they're able to edit together and weed out all the mistakes. In live performance, perfection is not something that's attainable, but it's the goal. And so when audiences hear a live concert for the first time, they might be let down and say, oh, there were a little, maybe that was not together, that was a little out of tune. That's live music. If you have to sacrifice perfection, what you gain is spontaneity and the idea of actually witnessing something being created. So to answer your question, sure, things happen all the time. Even in the best concerts, there's always little things which go amiss. The key is to not get too distracted by them and to worry about really making music, because I think more important is the emotions behind something. I'd rather something which is full of mistakes but has life, has meaning, rather than something that's played very safely, perfectly, but without much of a message.
Did you have some anecdote with that on the concert?
Oh, but nothing particular. I mean, look, stuff happens all the time, miss entrances, and you do your best. I mean, with experience, if something is not going right, you have to be very clear and make quick decisions on how to get things back together, because it's like a snowball going down a mountain. If you're not careful, it gets faster and bigger, and before you know it, a little problem becomes a big problem. I've never had to stop a concert. I've never had to start over. I've been lucky so far. I'm going to knock on wood.
So you as conductor, you need to know all instruments in the orchestra.
You have to know about them. You don't have to be able to play all of them, but you have to know what their capabilities are.
Which is your favorite instrument?
I'm a cellist, so I'd say cello and the French horn.
Wow.
These are my two favorite. I've always loved the way it sounds, the way it's used, the sonorities, the colors. It's similar to a cello. It has the same range.
Close to the human voice.
It matches the human voice as well. Yeah.
And for you, what is a feeling 5 minutes before the concert?
I'm always scared, to be honest. I suffer from stage fright. Of course, you become professional about it, but I don't think it goes away.
How do you manage with that? For example, we can give advice to some children, to some professionals also.
Well, when it happens, you just, I do something similar to Jonathan. I focus on the music, and I think it's important to know that we have to accept the fact that performances may not be perfect, but what is important is that you take all the risks which an exciting performance needs. And for me, it's a walk on a tightrope, so let's face it, it may work, it may go wrong, but this is something I think an audience wants to hear. An audience doesn't want to listen to a safe performance.
You can have a CD at home.
Indeed. So I think it's actually a very, very positive thing that you get the real performance with all the risks taken, and of course I always hope so much before each performance that it will all work out.
And after the concert?
Well, it depends. It's of course, if things go well, it can be wonderful. Although I always feel when a performance is over, you just want to continue, and there's always a slight disappointment that it is already over. Yeah.
So, gentlemen, you are both first time in Croatia, in Zagreb. How do you feel?
Wonderful. I mean, it's we visited the old town,
Okay.
and beautiful church and beautiful houses, and we looked with interest at the communist buildings and architecture, and it's a very interesting mix. Fascinating.
Jonathan, how do you
It's a
like?
beautiful city. It's unfortunate that I'm here very busy with work. I hope to come back sometime soon to have more time to see all the beautiful sights.
So, for the end, Andreas, what would be your message to our young musicians?
Well, I think it's. I always feel that we musicians should keep a musical heritage alive and bring it to new heights. And I think it's important to really focus on the music, and you will also advance in your career. Don't put your career first.
And Jonathan, you?
Music is about emotions, passion, having fun. This is what you need to be a great musician. These are the three most. Obviously, you need great talent, but you never have to lose sight. You can never lose sight of these basic things, of the function of music, communication, joy, all the emotions.
Jonathan, Andreas, thank you very much that you were our guest in our broadcast GlazbeEgo on TV+. We are very honored to have you, and we are very looking forward to the concert tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.